Paint splatters on screen revealing a series of images, a woman playing violin, then in a bright pink costume, then in a blind skier penny atop a mountain. The paint drip splatters revealing text in print and braille. Unsightly Opinions.
Hi, welcome to Unsightly Opinions. My name's Tamara. Today I am very excited because I am going to be joined by the one, the only Juan from JC5 Productions. We are going to be talking about how we film as blind and low vision content creators. Juan is a proper filmmaker, so I am sure I am going to be learning tons through the process of making this video. I am going to be sharing my thoughts with you, how my filming has evolved over the last 2 years of creating videos, and hopefully it'll give you some tidbits that you can use if you want to start creating videos. This is part one of a two-part video series where I will host the filming portion, but over on Juan's channel, you will find the second part of this video, which talks about how we edit video footage as blind and low vision creators. I have to tell you that this collab has been almost a year in the making. It has truly been the cursed collab where anything that could go wrong has gone wrong along the way, but I am so glad to finally be here making this video. I'm going to pass it over to Juan so he can introduce himself, his channel, and what you can find over there, and all of the links to the other videos and Juan's channel you can find in the description down below.
Thanks, Tamara. So, for those of you who don't know who I am, let me introduce myself really quick. My name is Juan Alcazar, my channel name is JC5 Productions, and I'm a legally blind filmmaker slash YouTuber. I was born with the condition retinitis pigmentosa, and for those of you who don't know what RP is, it's basically a degenerative eye condition of the retina which slowly degrades the vision over time, whether that's peripheral vision or your visual acuity, or if you just start getting night blindness over time. All of these are symptoms of RP, and there are many other symptoms, but these are the ones that I've encountered so far. So on my channel, you're going to find things like sit-down videos like this where I share my stories about being legally blind or just my thoughts in general about blind-related topics. But then I also create short films and little stories as well, so some of them dealing with disability. And if you're interested in any of that, then definitely give my channel a subscribe.
How do you film and set up a shot?
First, I want to talk about camera setup. This is something I don't find to be very accessible, so every time I have to set up a camera, I ask for sighted assistance. Depending on the situation, I may use an iPhone or a DSLR. I want to chat about my DSLR. I am using a Lumix G7. I picked this model for a couple of reasons. The first one was it was relatively inexpensive and an entry-level DSLR camera. The second one being it had a lot of tactile buttons that allowed me to do the basic navigation that I needed to do on the camera. So I can start and stop a shot, I can focus a shot, I can turn it on and off. It'll give me auditory cues if the battery's dying, if the SD card's full. It gives me a lot of auditory and tactile feedback that really help me navigate the camera. When it comes to changing the setting, I do have a tactile dot on the top of my camera, which helps me know that it's on the correct video setting. And I have the same on my lens so that I know that it's in its proper position for focus. I don't typically touch those, but having those on my camera, adding those little accessibility features, makes it accessible so I can double check and make sure something hasn't been bumped or moved. When it comes to using this DSLR, I am a set it and forget it kind of gal. I use all of the auto settings. I don't touch any menus. I don't go in and adjust the lighting. I don't do any of that stuff because I can't see what it's going to look like. But I have made a couple of tweaks that make it way more accessible and a lot easier to use. The first one is an auto shutter, which works really well. It's got 2 tactile buttons. I can autofocus and I can start and stop recording, which is fantastic. The second is I've put in a perpetual battery, or a battery that's connected to power, so that I can run the camera continuously for hours on end without having to worry about changing batteries. And that's helpful because when you're moving things around and you're trying to pull things in and out of the camera, it can jostle it and change where the camera is pointing. So being able to minimize doing that makes a huge difference. And if you're looking at my camera, you can probably see that we've tried a couple of different things here in terms of camera positioning. You may see that I have these fuzzy dots. This was our original position for the camera, but we realized realized very quickly that if the camera gets nudged even just a little bit off of those dots, and I won't necessarily notice if that's happened, it's a completely different shot. So what we've done is we've actually taped the camera to a tripod on a shelf in this closet here, so it cannot move. It's been tightened down, it's been cranked down, it won't move. And that's something that I think is really helpful if you're trying to get a shot set up, is make sure it is earthquake proof in terms of how stable it is and how static it's going to be for you. We streamlined the whole process to turn this on to one switch. So all I have to do is flip the power on my power bar at the bottom of my closet, and everything is turned on and ready to go. All I have to do is sit in my chair, focus my shot, and then I'm good to go. The last piece for setting up my camera is actually getting things right in terms of chair positioning or positioning from the camera. For me, I always sit while I'm filming, so what we did to make that accessible is we put some tactile sticky Velcro dots on the floor that I can line up with my chair legs, and then all I do is I find the dots on the floor and I line each one up with a chair leg. And then I know my chair is in the perfect position every single time. When it comes to filming something like a short where I have moving pieces all of the time, I have a slightly different setup that I use. I try and make sure that as many pieces are consistent as possible so I don't have to guess. The first thing we did is we made sure that when we set up the shot, I could line up the volume up-down button on my camera with the edge of the holder, so I can put it in the exact same position every single time. The second thing we did is we made sure that the shot lined up with the corner of the table. So I just nudge the tripod up against the edge of the table, and then I line up the third leg with the corner, and I am going to have a perfect shot every single time. The last piece is I do not take this tripod down. It gets stored in the corner of my office when I don't use it in the exact right angle position. Everything is locked down, so nothing ever changes. So tell me, Juan, how do you set up your camera?
As far as what I film with, I currently film with a Canon T7i, and the reason why I say currently is because I'm kind of going back and forth between my iPhone 13 Pro and my T7i, and the big reason for that is, well, it's kind of a weird situation knowing that your phone shoots at a higher quality 4K than your supposedly serious camera, which is your T7i, which shoots in 1080p HD. Now, that being said, on a side note, I did make a video recently talking about the iPhone 13 Pro and if the camera that's built into it, is it a suitable option for a filmmaker who's blind or visually impaired? I shot a film with it, I give you my thoughts, the pros and cons, and if you're interested in that, hopefully Tamara can leave a link to that video in the description. So back to the T7i. So, to be honest, it's definitely not the most accessible camera at all. I mean, I really wish it was more accessible, but I'm working with what I got. The way I get around the camera mainly is I memorize what buttons are where, because a lot of the buttons I actually don't ever touch, but the ones that I do, I know where they're located, and because I've had experience with those Canon cameras in the past, I generally know where settings are. And yes, I do use manual settings a lot, even though I really should be using more auto settings these days, although I'm slowly gravitating to that more. The things that I still adjust manually are ISO, my aperture, things like that, but as far as focus goes, which I'll get to in a little bit, that kind of drifts more towards the automatic settings. So the good thing about the menus in the camera itself is that, yes, there is kind of a dark mode for that, so white letters against a black background, so that's good. The bad news is that you can't really make the font bigger, so a lot of times I have to just lean in really close to the camera just to see what's on the menus, or I use a digital magnifier. A lot of times though, if I'm in a hurry, I just lean in close because that's a lot faster, but if I have to look real close at some of the actual buttons, then the digital magnifier is how I usually go, especially for settings and buttons that I'm not familiar with. I know leaning in close isn't really the best thing to do because for me, I tend to get migraines a lot, especially if I'm straining my eyes even a decent amount. But still, if I just want to get something done really quick, then I do my best to just lean in close, change the settings that I need, and just get back to shooting. Although there is a bit of a solution to being able to tweak the settings when you're, like, let's say in this situation, sitting in front of the camera, and I don't want to just go back to the camera and tweak things, then I use the Canon Camera Connect app. That's a free app that you can use. It's made by Canon. And the good news is that, yes, you're able to basically remote control any and almost all your settings from just your phone. It is kind of sort of screen reader compatible, but the thing is I have to go into screen recognition mode back and forth a lot, and sometimes that can really be annoying, and a lot of times that just, it's better to just go up to the camera and tweak the settings because that sometimes takes less time. And the good news though is that you can hit record remotely using that app. So something else that I do is I braille my lenses. So because I use a DSLR, I have a decent amount of lenses. Not a lot, but enough to probably get them confused, especially if my camera bag is somewhere in a dark area. For the most part, it is, because usually I have the lights pointing in the opposite direction where I place my camera bag. And if I'm having to fumble around in the camera bag, then I know just by touching the braille label, like if it says 50, I know that's my 50mm that I'm grabbing.
How do you light a shot?
Lighting can be extraordinarily complicated if you're blind or low vision. It is an incredibly subtle and nuanced art. I strongly encourage getting outside assistance and a second opinion, whether you're blind or not, to make sure that your lighting looks good, especially if you're new to lighting for filming. And my lighting has changed significantly over the last couple of years. Every single location we film in has a different lighting setup. When I started, I didn't have a lot of fancy equipment, so I started by looking out a window during the daytime. Immediately, that became problematic for me because I am highly photophobic. So that caused active pain, and I couldn't keep my eyes open, which is what I wanted to do in my videos. So I ended up buying a few lighting pieces to help make the lighting more manageable. And you can find a lot of inexpensive softbox or ring light solutions with varying levels of lighting on Amazon, at Walmart, so you don't have to spend a fortune. Behind my DSLR, I have a softbox, and this softbox has 3 or 4 different diffusion sheets sitting on top of it to make sure that the lighting is diffuse enough and dim enough that I can look directly at it without actively squinting. It took a lot of fiddling and a lot of trial and error before we got this particular angle right, and before we got the correct number of diffusion sheets to get enough lighting while I was still comfortable. We also have a piece of reflective foil. It's just tin foil taped to the inside of this closet door just to bring additional light onto my face. In order to make sure the foil is sitting in the right place, we have a really silly system where I have a piece of ribbon that I hook through the door to hold the closet door all the way open, which 1, keeps it out of shot and moving, but 2, makes sure that the light is reflecting at the appropriate angle so that I'm getting lit. Because I am albino and extraordinarily pale, whenever I have direct lighting on my face, the camera will immediately assume that things are blown out and dark in the background. So the way we counteract that and make sure that I have balanced lighting in my environment is we've had to light my backdrop. When we first started in this space, I didn't have any lighting on the bookshelf, so my backdrop looked incredibly dark. Adding the lighting in really made things look a lot more balanced, so I am incredibly grateful that I had all of that sighted assistance to make sure that things looked good, clean, and polished. My lighting setup is actually very simple. I don't have to go around and turn on every individual light on every individual shelf. I have one little power bar and I just flip a switch. And that's my entire lighting setup. I'm curious to know how you handle lighting when you set up your shots, Juan.
So lighting, it's one of those other tricky things because there's so many different ways of lighting a shot, but one way that you're never going to see me light is from the front. So you're never going to see any light ring reflections off of my pupils. So I never light from the front because it just looks really flat to me. But what I do though is I light from the sides. So right now I have 2 softboxes at 45-degree angles on opposite sides. I have one softbox to my right, which is pointing directly at me, and then I have another softbox to my left, which is pointing, it's being bounced off of the wall and the ceiling, so it kind of gives off a softer look. So one side of my face is well lit, the other side it's still in shadows, but it's lit where you can still see detail, and that's just how I like lighting, because it gives more depth. Another reason why I can't light from the front really is, well, because I also have photophobia, because that's also something that comes with retinitis pigmentosa. Another reason why I can't light from the front, and maybe this might be a good thing about having RP, if there was such a good thing about having RP, but Because I have such a narrow field of view, I basically have tunnel vision, and because I'm looking straight where the camera is, or in that general direction, I can see the glare coming from the lights, but because I'm not looking directly at them, my focus isn't there, the glare doesn't bother me like as if I was staring directly at a light.
How do you focus a shot?
When it comes to focusing a shot, this $10 remote control auto shutter is the best $10 I have ever spent in my life. When I'm ready to start filming, all I do is I make sure that I'm sitting in the position I'm going to be filming in, and I lightly press the button. It's going to give me an audible chirp to let me know that it's focused. So I'm going to press the button down. It's giving me a little chirp to let me know it's focused. I'm going to cover my face with my hands so that it doesn't autofocus on my face, dive out of frame, and then there's a little switch on the back of the camera that I push towards the very top, and then I just return to my seat and I'm ready to start filming. If I press the button down firmly, it's going to start recording. And then it gives me a double beep to let me know that I've concluded recording. I love this remote for filming because it makes it so easy and accessible.
Pacey, you're snoring too much.
Because its different settings have different audio cues, I will always know exactly what it's doing by its specific chirp. How do you get your shots focused, Juan?
As far as focusing is concerned, that's definitely something that is precise, and like I mentioned earlier, that's one of those things that I've let the camera do most of the work now. What I used to do though is I used to basically put something in the area that I was standing in or sitting in to kind of, be a stand-in, go to my camera, manually focus, hit record, quickly run over, see how I look like, took out the SD card, went to the computer, zoomed in really close, and then I was like, I'm in focus. Yeah, I'm just going to let the autofocus do the work now. The good news is that the T7i has a really good autofocus system. It has a lot of focus points, but the other nice thing is that it has face detection, and right now that's what I have it on. So it's looking for faces and it's focusing on any faces that are in front of the camera. If it's the opposite situation though, and I'm not in front of the camera, if I'm behind the camera and if I'm filming something, then maybe I can use the manual focus more, but still I try to use autofocus a bit more because like I said, it's easier to just let the camera do the heavy lifting. Then I just flip the switch on the lens that goes from manual to autofocus, so I flip it to manual. And as simple as that is, that does save me a lot of trouble from going into just the camera menus and looking around and being like, okay, what is the toggle for autofocus in the menus? No, there's a flip I can switch. There's a switch I can flip on the lens.
How do you film on iPhone?
This video would not be complete without mentioning the incredible accessibility features built right into most smartphones. This is what I started filming on before I had my DSLR, and it's still one of the most accessible ways I've found to film yourself. I am going to screen record and show you exactly what happens when I have voiceover on and I'm trying to film. When voiceover is on, it will give you specific descriptions as to what's in frame to the best of its ability and whether or not your camera is level. Both of those things can be incredibly helpful descriptive features. Let me show you. VoiceOver will give you haptic feedback to confirm that the shot is level. It sometimes also confirms that with a vocal response. I'll show you that now. And then when I tilt off, it gives me a high pitch to low pitch to let me know it's tilted. Level. And low to high, and it's just said it's level.
A photo containing stuffed animals, an adult, jewelry, a hat and a microphone. Possible text, 0 hours, 0 minutes, and 0 seconds 4K24. Left, camera control status, flash, off, button.
All I have to do to start recording is I have to hit the volume up button. I may not necessarily know what exactly is in shot or if anything's getting cut off, but I am able to start and stop recording and even adjust a lot of the settings independently just using VoiceOver. So I think that in many respects is a lot more accessible than anything you'd ever find on a DSLR, and the quality on smartphone cameras are getting so much better, they're almost comparable to what you'd get in a DSLR. And then all I have to do to stop recording is hit the volume up button again. I'm really excited to hear your thoughts on accessibility in filmmaking and how to make cameras accessible, because I think you have some fantastic ideas. We've had this conversation briefly a couple of times, and I think there's a lot of room for improvement. How do you navigate filming on your phone, Juan?
Any advice to aspiring filmmakers?
So if I had any advice for any potential blind or visually impaired filmmakers, it would be to start with the camera that you already have. And for most of you, that's going to be your cell phone. And for a lot of you, that's likely going to be an iPhone. Go into the camera app, play around with that, just film a few things. Make mistakes. Make as many mistakes as you can, because you know what? Everybody, and no matter what discipline, started off as a beginner. And you know what? The more mistakes you make now, the less you're going to make in the future. If you're going to use something besides a cell phone, like a DSLR or a point and shoot camera, then get something that's the most accessible to you. Unfortunately, there's so many different cameras that they're not all built the same, and unfortunately, I don't think there's any that are as accessible as a cell phone. But still, that's not to say that there's none that are absolutely, not accessible at all. Just look for what you think is the most accessible to you, see if you can afford it, and if so, then hey, practice with that as well. Thanks, Tamara, for having me on your channel, and yeah, it was awesome. Hopefully we get to collab again, and it was awesome to share all this knowledge that we have about creating our videos on YouTube.
Thank you so much for watching this video, and a very special thanks to Juan for joining me despite all of the hiccups to create this collab. If you have any questions about filmmaking, I will be answering those, and I can pass any complex ones off to Juan in the comments down below. I'm sure I will be doing more collabs with Juan in the future, but if you've made it this far, please consider checking out the other video, liking, commenting, subscribing, and engaging over here or on Juan's channel. But that's all I have for you today. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.